I had a really good handle on the fact that this project really lit me up for a long time. When it stopped lighting that fire internally is when I knew it was time. And I think that's just such a good guttural instinct for everybody, is when a passion stops becoming a passion, you have to let it go. Yay!
Julie Wolbach, thank you so much for hopping on the Coherence Collective podcast. I am grateful that you're able to take the time to kind of talk about what makes you so unique and special, and why I think you're such a good fit for speaking about following your instincts and really following through successfully doing so.
Thank you. It's so fun to be here. I'm excited.
Yay! So a little history, a little tidbit. We are cousins. I have known you my whole life. You have known me most of your life. But basically, for as long as you have been in my life, I have been awestruck by your ability to kind of follow through with whatever ideas you have and just play around with it amidst social conditionings of potential like doubt and what have you. So I've always been fascinated by that, and I'm curious if you could provide a little bit of context as to like what has given you that support, if it's internal support, if there's been external support, what has fostered that for you?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's a lot of, I have a lot of internal confidence, which, it's funny to say out loud, but I've always kind of felt very confident in my ideas, my abilities, in order to kind of see some of my creative pursuits through. And I think that's really the key, is following your gut, following your heart, not letting any sort of naysaying or even any internal noise stop you from at least attempting or trying or, seeing something through, at least scratching the surface and seeing how far you can get. I think I've always had that internal fire, which lets me pursue everything that I've ever wanted to.
I mean, even from like a very, very young age, you were able to get your creative projects out into the professional world. And that's something that hit local newsstands. It is a really fun tidbit. Can you tell people a little bit about that project and what inspired you to do that, or what created that curiosity?
Yes. So just to elaborate a little bit more on what you're talking about, when I was 10 years old, I launched my first business, and it was a very successful business. It was a greeting card business. And some of you might be wondering how a 10-year-old gets into that business. It started as a class project. My fifth grade teacher had assigned the entire class to come up with some sort of business idea. And, because I've always been very creative, I just thought it would be super fun to start some greeting cards. And what these greeting cards actually consisted of were little cellophane baggies stuffed with items that represented the holiday they were intended for. So, for example, if it was a birthday card, the little cellophane baggie would be stuffed with a candle, some confetti, a balloon, tied with a cute little ribbon and fastened to the card. And I had always had great handwriting from the time I was a child. So there was always some pretty little cursive sentiment scribbled on the outside of it. So it wasn't just happy birthday. It might have been, celebrating you today or something like that. And I think it was really cute. There were no cards that were like that on the market. And I wound up selling them on consignment to a local gift store. So that was my very first ever creative pursuit that saw some serious success.
How did you at that age decide that this was going to become a profession? And granted, short stint, but like, how did you decide at that age that was going to be something that you were going to take out publicly?
Yeah, I think that project was one of the first that really lit me up. It really got me so excited to be able to see some of these creative impulses through. I saw that people really enjoyed them. I saw that people seriously wanted to buy them. I saw the idea inspire others. I saw, even as a child, adults being really taken aback by the whole project. And so all of those feelings combined really lit me up from within. And, when something lights you up from within, you want to continue doing more of that and exploring more of that.
So you've been able to take this sort of mentality throughout life. Has there ever been anything that you've started and you were like, you know what, I need to let go, and including that, right? And what and why? And why were you okay letting it go versus like being told that it's not for you?
Yeah. So having this conversation right now actually brings me back to my next creative pursuit. You might remember this actually very well. So it was a business idea, and I am kicking myself today because in present day, it would have done so well. But I must have been around 15 years old, and I had decided that I wanted to create this merchandise company called Religious Pink. Do you remember this?
Yeah, vaguely.
It was a line. Yes, it was a line of printed clothing. So, but it would have been branded Religious Pink. And I wrote a whole little business plan to the best of my capabilities at 15 years old. And my dad was going to invest in it. And it was one of those ideas that I just never saw through because I think some of that inner confidence was a little bit dim at that point. And I didn't really have that fire. I wasn't 100% confident in myself that I would be able to take that somewhere. I started doubting some of those ideas. It didn't really feel original to me. I didn't think that I was going to be this number one player in the market. And so I quietly withdrew that idea. Fast forward to today, there's a huge market of, printed clothing. And I'm sure it would have done well had I followed that lead and I followed that internal gut instinct, but I unfortunately did not. So, that's, again, it's a lesson in why you should follow that inner gut fire. But that was one case where
Can we pick apart that mentality though of like why did you feel not confident in that? Like what, because you started this by saying how confident you are and it takes confidence to be able to do this. So what made that happen?
I think it all goes back to instinct, right? I think there are just some gut feelings that you have where you're like, I can really see this through. It's like I have this vision where I can see, step A all the way through to step Z, and I could see it being successful. And I think that sometimes your gut is really helpful too, because while it might spark these creative ideas and might light that fire and get you going and get you really excited, ultimately that spark kind of zones out, and you just know that while that was a short-term idea that lit you up, it wouldn't have carried you, or it wouldn't have been able to really sustain. And that again has also been a gut feeling of mine, and that's in business and that's in life. Your gut is really intended to protect you and to protect all of your decisions. And sometimes you can have that internal, spark. And then also your gut is like, wait a second, right? Like this is not meant to be your long-term play here. And so I think it's twofold, right? I think it's, you have your spark, you have your gut, but it's all a very instinctive process.
So what about people who would argue like that there's a need for discipline and consistency even when things get tough or something? Like how do you discern between the two?
Yes, I think things are always going to get tough. I mean, even in very successful businesses like UES Girls, which I know we're going to talk on in a little bit, there are always going to be challenges in your businesses and your ideas. But again, I think it's your gut that really has your best interest at heart. And sometimes your gut is just telling you that, like, at least right now, this is not something that your body, your brain is going to be able to handle at this point in your life. So we're going to have to withdraw from that idea. Mm. That's not to say that we're backing out from a challenge. That's to say that we're backing out from an idea that doesn't have this long lifespan that you have the capacity for right now.
So that brings me, I do want to talk about UES Girls, and I'm glad that you brought it up. And for those listening, this is a social media project that Julie ended up doing and doing incredibly well in a very short period of time. And I would love for you to talk about it because in a short period of time, you literally amassed like tens of thousands of followers, and it was wild to watch from the sidelines.
Yeah. So do you want me to talk about kind of like
Yeah,
platform formed?
why don't we talk about like what inspired it, what like how in that realm like you saw like where you saw the vision initially, how you saw it kind of growing and evolving over time. I know there's a lot of questions in there, but go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those of you, listening, I'm sure you are not familiar with UES Girls. So what UES Girls was for 3.5 years, it was a social, and it still exists, but it's a social platform primarily dedicated to women meeting other people and connecting to kind of bolster their social life. So rewind a little bit. 4 years ago, I woke up one morning. I was in my early 30s. All of my girlfriends had left the city, and my social life was really, really struggling. I'm single. I don't have children. And I was like, no, this can't be it for me. So I've always had an appetite for social media. I've always been creative. I live on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. I always stay here in the area. And so I had an idea to start this social media account, UES Girls, that would essentially document everything I did, everywhere I went, everything I ate on the Upper East Side. And the goal was really initially just a creative outlet, just to see if this was something that I could pursue, something that would stick, something that I could really kind of, you know, envelop myself in, so to speak. And it was a slow start because the truth of the matter is this is a very saturated part of the city, and there are lots of well-established influencers up on the Upper East Side who already do this extremely, extremely well, already have a ton of followers. So it did struggle a little bit at the beginning. And then one day I put my face on camera and I had asked my 400 followers if anybody would be interested in grabbing brunch. And that was kind of the beginning of it all because there was an overwhelming response of people who wanted to go out and to get brunch with me, to get brunch with other women. And that kind of, alarm bell went off and really spoke to me and said, oh my God, there are just so many people, regardless of what life stage you're in, because all of these women that follow the account, not everyone was single. You have a mix of ages, you have a mix of nationalities, ethnicities, relationship statuses who all wanted to go get a meal together. And so what that really taught me was that there is an appetite for connection. Now, this was in 2022. So this was just a couple of years off of COVID. And so it was very clear that people were still craving that in-person connection. And I ran with that. And so what UES Girls morphed into was not only a platform to share personally what I did and where I went and what I loved about the Upper East Side, but it became an events incubator where about 20 ambassadors who signed on to kind of lead these programs just allowed predominantly women to connect with one another. And that was around brunches, that was around happy hours, that was around interest-based events like knitting, like book clubs, like walks. And it really just gave, like I had said, all of these women up here an outlet to connect with one another. And I always said that if I was able to facilitate one friendship for everybody, I would have felt so good about that mission. And so UES Girls is alive and well today. It's under new leadership. But it is just it's a business that's so near and dear to my heart because not only was it fulfilling from a creative pursuit, but it really did a lot to help so many women in New York City.
Can we talk about, you were saying initially that this was it was a hyper saturated marketplace or for you, and I'm curious, you were able to, even in that, create deals with local businesses. And for brands who are starting out or for people who are starting out, I would love to have you share a bit about how to get out of your head and just kind of start to position yourself in a way where you have that ability to create new relationships on the business side and grow even in the face of saturation.
Right. And remember at the beginning, I spoke about it's that inner confidence that I have, right? For better or for worse, it's that inner confidence. And sometimes in these situations, whether you have that inner confidence yourself or you struggle with that, sometimes it's about putting your ego aside and just trying, right?
Mhm.
Closed mouths don't get fed is one of my favorite sentiments ever. And it is so true because the worst that anybody is ever going to say to you is no. And does a no sting? A no absolutely stings, but you brush yourself off. And for every no you get, there is a yes in your future too, right? And so taking that mentality when you're starting a business, when you're starting a creative pursuit, you have to take those risks, right? You have to take those risks because if you don't, you never know what can kind of come of that. Because again, somebody is going to say yes. And one of my earliest brand partners was this local bakery who, despite me having just a couple hundred followers on my account, agreed to partner with me on a giveaway. And I was nobody. I mean, nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what the account was. And I asked them. They did not approach me. I asked. And they were very nice and they decided to partner with me on a giveaway. And for those of you not in this world, a giveaway essentially is just posting on my platform, follow me, follow the bakery, say something that you like about something, and somebody's going to be selected at random to win a box of pastries or something. That's what a giveaway is in this social media world. And so they were super kind and they agreed to do that. And giveaways are great for social media because it helps get you followers. It helps get your brand partner followers. It's really incredible for brand awareness. Everybody always loves winning something. And so that was kind of one of the earliest brand partnerships that I pursued. But it took a very long time of me building an audience on this platform before brands began reaching out to me. I would say it took a full year before brands started reaching out and saying, we would love to work with you. We would love to partner with you. How can we go about doing that? So that first year was a hustle. That first year was a lot of me knocking on doors and saying, hey, giving my whole elevator pitch. This is who I am. This is what I do. Is there an opportunity to work together? And it's about putting that ego aside and just trying. The worst you will hear is no.
Mhm. And did you reach out to more than this partner at the time? Like, was it a bunch of people? You kind of like throwing noodles on a wall and seeing what stuck?
100%. 100%. And like I had said, there were lots of no's, and rightfully so. Listen, I mean, I wouldn't want to give anybody a false sense of hope. When you have a few hundred followers, brands do not care about your reach because you have no reach. Even if you are trying to reach a small portion of the city like I was only trying to reach the Upper East Side. And regardless, a few hundred followers were not going to hold that much weight to a brand, even a local brand. So yes, there was a lot of outreach. There were a lot of no's that I got. And like I had said, probably around the year mark is when companies, brands, local businesses started reaching out to me. That's when it was still a nice mix. I was still reaching out to brands that I was interested in working with, but that's when I started seeing the return on my, investment of the account is probably about the year mark.
And what was the difference between the first partnership that you had and that year mark? Aside from consistently posting, what would you say was the turning point that made brands more invested in what you were posting and your platform?
Listen, I mean, again, the platform is very specific to a neighborhood in the city. So a lot of the brands or a lot of the companies and businesses that I worked with are local businesses whose number one priority is getting local clients, right? Like they want brand awareness. Of course, they want people to know that their business exists in the neighborhood, but they also want to get clients. So I would say most of the brands that I worked with were hyper local. And so what they really cared about was my audience count, right? So once I kind of cracked that like 1,000, 1,500 follower mark is when hyper local brands and businesses started taking me seriously. I would say that was probably the same criteria as well for a little bit more national brands. And I don't want to say that I've worked with a ton of national brands because quite frankly, again, national brands are a lot more fixated on the number of followers, but there are still some national brands that have reached out to me and pursued me to work with, just because again, it was reaching a neighborhood in a very important DMA for them, which is New York City. But yes, I would say audience was probably that number one factor when it came to working with brands and even local businesses.
Something that stood out to me is in this platform, you evolved multiple times, and it was only within a few years again that the growth amassed massively. And so when you started this as posting a faceless account, and then it started to turn into an account that was driven by Julie Wolvack, but for the UES girl community. And I'm curious because that was something that, relative to the community's social media platforms that are out there, like that was something that was unique because it was your voice driving this brand. What inspired you to do that?
Yes, great question. So I think I'd mentioned at the time the Upper East Side influencer market was already super saturated. There were a few accounts that were doing Upper East Side coverage extremely well. What they weren't doing is they were not putting their face on camera. They were not making their accounts about them. Their accounts were very pointedly about the Upper East Side, the best of the neighborhood, what to do, where to go, what's new and hot, what just opened, what closed. It was more of like a neighborhood resource, which is phenomenal. And it's a huge reason. It's the primary reason as to why they have really, really big following, is because most people who follow a neighborhood dedicated account are following because they want to know what's going on in their neighborhood. And so, like I had mentioned, when I first started this account, I knew very early on that there was just a lot of competition in that arena. There was no way that I was going to step on the scene and do the same thing as them and be just as successful as they are. And so I kind of knew that I was going to have to do something a little bit different. And that difference really was organic because I, for lack of a better word, was lonely. I was looking for friends and connection. I was leveraging my account with just a few hundred followers. I was leveraging my account to see if I could find that connection for myself. And so that spark is really what created the difference, is when I realized that so many other people were seeking that same connection. That's when I realized that that was going to be the differentiator, is that my account was going to be heavily focused on creating friendships, all on the Upper East Side. I didn't want to negate the fact that this was an Upper East Side based account. I didn't want to disregard the fact that I was permanently on the Upper East Side. I was not leaving. Everything that I was going to post and share was going to be on the Upper East Side. But that really big differentiator was going to be that this was now going to be a platform for connection. And that's kind of when the fun began, was when I was kind of trying to figure out what types of connective ways were really going to help people in the community.
And something that I also found really cool about your journey is that in this, because you were craving connection so much, I think what you did that was admirable and unique to this world is you brought for lack of a better word, you brought a lot of these UES accounts together to be more like as friends and to collaborate. And prior to that, that was really lacking. And I like, what inspired you to do that? Because you had your growing community on one end, and now you're also helping kind of gather these platforms. So what led you to do that? What made you feel like that was the right move?
Yeah, I think, listen, I mean, these girls, prior to me knowing them, they were local celebrities. They were girls on the Upper East Side who had really successful accounts. And that was very attractive to me, right? It was very aspirational and inspirational to me. And I genuinely wanted to meet them. And I remember thinking that it was very interesting that they were all uniquely separate, is that they weren't friends. They didn't get together. They didn't exchange information about businesses. They didn't exchange information about their rate cards and what they, charge brands to do anything for. And to me, it's a really beneficial thing to be able to do that with other influencers, especially in your neighborhood. And I just didn't really understand why none of that was happening. So yes, I had asked one day for them all to get together. And so we grabbed a meal. And that was kind of the start of a nice little friendship when I was spearheading the account. And it was really great. It was nice to meet them. It was nice to be around them. It was nice to learn from them. So that was, that was a really nice thing.
I feel like that just goes to show you it's like, number one, just as you were saying even earlier, like, don't be afraid to ask, because the worst thing that happens is no. And second of all, like, it's so satisfying to be around people that is like inspire you, and it's okay to be the one that like wants to be in the room that is inspiring versus the one that is inspiring, right? Like, there's something about the give and take, the ebb and flow of connection and meeting new people that lends itself to these opportunities and this growth. And what made UES Girls too so special, because you were constantly like flexing this give and take, and it was just so special.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. It was nice. It's really nice to be able to lean on each other for inspiration and just for friendship. And yeah, it was and it is a very special piece, a very special ethos of what UES Girls is and represents.
So talk to me about, because another thing that you did that was really unique is you, at a particular time not too long ago, you decided that it was time to say goodbye to this big piece of your life. It was, as you said, it's your baby, right? You birthed it, and you let it go. And I think that is something that is really hard for people to do in general, to say goodbye when the timing feels right, or not necessarily feels right, but instinctually is the time. What happened with talk to me.
Yeah. Listen, it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation. It's that inner confidence, and it's your gut instinct, right? And again, your gut knows what's best for you. And it was 3.5 years into the account, and I really felt like I had given everything I possibly could. From the account, I made my own group of girlfriends, so it satiated everything that I had personally set out to do. It had amassed over 17 followers of the account, most of who were local women. From it, I gained about 20 ambassadors who were working for free because they themselves loved the mission. And when I say working for free, these were the girls, these were the women that were putting on events for the neighborhood, for the community. I felt like the account was in such a great place. It was such a well-oiled machine. And I just felt like there was nothing else that I was able to contribute to it at that point. So my choices were to either retire the account, just to stop doing it, to cease posting, to, essentially to disappear, or to hand it over to somebody else. And had that account just been about Julie Wolbeck, the influencer on the Upper East Side, I would have retired it. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't. It became this juggernaut of community. And I felt like if I had just retired it, it wouldn't have done so many people such a disservice. And so it felt like my only option was really to hand over the reins to somebody. Now, I was looking to make a little bit of money from this, because why not, right? To go back to our earlier point, might as well try to sell it because worst case scenario, nobody wants to buy it. And then I would just hand it off to someone, right? But why not try to make a little money? And so that's essentially what happened, is that I pitched this as a business, which it truly was. I was making money from this. And I pitched it as a business. I demonstrated all of the value, and I put it out there that I was parting ways with the account. And I did have a few people raise their hands to buy it. And I selected the person that I felt was the best woman for the job. And so today, the account is under somebody else's leadership, and it's thriving, and she's doing an incredible job. And, the one thing that I wanted to make sure when I parted with the account was that whoever was going to take it over was going to promise me that the ethos of the account, which is the experiential piece, the piece that allows other women to meet each other, to make friends, to have that opportunity to do so, I wanted to make sure that that was still going to be alive and well. And so she promised, and she has followed through on her promise, and UES Girls continues to be a platform for connection. And so I couldn't be happier. My baby is in very good hands, and it's thriving.
Talk to me a little bit, because this is such a unique process. Like, talk to me a little bit about how you mentally transitioned out of this, because I can only imagine, and for the audience, like when you are so enmeshed in a project in your with your baby, right? Like the letting go, I really think is an important element, and doing it in a healthy way is really important. And what did that look like for you?
Yeah. Look, I'm only human, and I am still dealing with the aftermath of letting my baby go, right? That account was mine for 3.5 years, and UES Girls was synonymous with me and who I am. I mean, that was my identity for a few years. But the decision at the time when I knew that I wanted to part with it was very firm. There was there weren't any sleepless nights where it was a should I or shouldn't I. It's like I knew it was that gut instinct that I knew it was time. So the actual parting with the account was very simple. I think the aftermath of no longer being tied to the account was a lot more complicated internally, right? A lot of my perks were stripped away. All of my responsibilities for the account were stripped away. So that was a lot of change in a very short period of time. And so, of course, there was a mourning period, right? It's like your lifestyle kind of shifts a little bit. Your responsibilities shift a little bit. But in giving up the account, it allowed me to regain a lot of time back. And so I was able to dabble in, or at least I had the free time to experiment with other creative pursuits if I wanted to, or something else that really lit me up, right? And I think that's another key factor, is that I had a really good handle on the fact that this project really lit me up for a long time. And once it started lighting that fire internally, when it stopped lighting that fire internally is when I knew it was time. And I think that's just such a good guttural instinct for everybody, is that, again, it's like your gut has your best interests at heart, right? And so your gut knows what's lighting you up. Your gut knows what's not lighting you up. And what is the point of continuing something that doesn't light that fire inside of you, especially something that you elect to do? This is not my full-time job, right? Like, this was job number 2. So when job number 2, or when a passion stops becoming a passion, you have to let it go. You have to make space to potentially create something else, or you have to make space to find that new thing that's going to light that spark again. And so, yes, it was definitely a difficult transition. Even today, there are, it's like there are still some little pieces. I'll see posts, I'll hear about things that UES Girls is doing. And, of course it's a little bit sad, but the fact that the account is alive and well, and it's in great hands, and it's helping so many women, I couldn't be happier with the legacy that, it's really left. So I think that's a piece that really helps get me through any of those insecurities.
In times of transition, I think what you share is
is very real for a lot of people. Like, it is okay to have so many feelings at the same time and live with so many feelings at the same time. And you probably, because it was such a huge piece of who you are, and still is a piece of who you are, like, that's going to live with you for as long as this account like is in the atmosphere, and that's amazing, like, to be able to love something, miss something, yearn for since, like, activities that were once in your hands. Like, that is so natural, and it is part of the human experience to feel this, like, wide spectrum of feelings. And so the fact that you're allowing yourself versus, like, resisting those feelings is, I think, also very important for you, for people to do during times of transition. Like, that is, I think, key. Yeah. Yeah. And you have to. And again, whether it's a creative pursuit that you are mourning or anything else in your life, any other transition under any sort of category or purview or piece of your life, it's going through the motions, it's feeling the feelings, it's not suppressing how you feel, because you're entitled to feel all of the feels, and going through those motions and feeling everything is really what helps you get through to the other side. Because if you block those feelings, you'll be dealing with that for a lot longer than you will if you just allow yourself to feel, move through, and move on.
So what's next for you? Like, now that things are, like, now that chapter is closed and you have been pursuing new things, what's next for you?
I think that's a great question. There are lots of small creative pursuits that I'm dabbling in. And I think it's just kind of more at this point, it's dating these creative ideas and creative pursuits to really understand what feels meaningful and what feels like it has the potential to stick and have some longevity. So right now I'm just kind of in that process of understanding what that next piece is that really feels like it could light me up the same way that UBS Girls did. So TBD. Like I said, we're still dating and figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the projects that you're enjoying dating and doing, or what are some of those, like, creative outlets that you have now?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple. I've always been a writer, and my writing ebbs and flows, but I do write for a local news site, which kind of keeps me tied to the Upper East Side a little bit. I do write about where I go and what I do on the Upper East Side. I dole out a little bit of bits and pieces of my relationships, and so that kind of satiates that part of that creative itch. And then I also help a couple of local businesses with some of their social media and content strategy. So a lot of what I'm dabbling in right now, gives me that sense of purpose that I sought with UES Girls, just on a little bit of a low committal scale.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine having the high touch pursuits right now is something that it is lighter for you, because you had such a heavy hand and investment in an account for so long. So having that breather to be able to do a few other things is a nice change of pace.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about, based on what you have done with UES Girls and your love for social media, like, where do you see the trends going? Like, like you said, 2022, there was such a desire for in-person connection and community. Is that still alive and well? Do you think that things are changing on social media since then? What are your thoughts? What are your predictions?
So it's really funny. I do keep top of a lot of social media trends, and I do read a lot about that because it always has been and it is such a passion of mine. Interestingly enough, I did read this headline recently that says influencers are out, communities are in. And it did make me feel really good because we were already ahead of the trend, right? UES Girls was that community first social media account. So so in terms of social media, trends are really heading in the direction where communities and micro influencers, because people are really trusting. People will always trust what other people like. That's just who we are. That's human nature. But I think the term influencer, especially today, comes with some ill feeling for some. I think, I don't think it's a term that a lot of people take too kindly. And I think that people really are looking towards other people with smaller platforms as being more relatable, right? As being more relatable, more accessible. And by definition, these people are still micro influencers. But it's a scale again that feels like, okay, well, this influencer could be my friend, right? I trust this influencer because they're not doing this for millions of dollars. They're not doing it for the paycheck. They're doing it because they do genuinely like it. And I trust their opinion. So I do think communities, we're going to see a really big shift from big influencers to a little bit more community based.
And for the people who are, I think it's interesting, because there are people who really take off based on the um, concept that this person is hyper relatable, but they take off and they take off like quite quickly, especially with the likes of TikTok, for example. And I have a couple of people in mind, but there have been, I think, in some of these influencers who I'm thinking of, like there's been such a conscious decision not to pick up on like major brand deals that feel like, oh, they have been bought out, and the organic decision to kind of only follow brands and work with brands that are still in alignment with the video so they feel super, super natural is something that sticks, because I think people are just bored by the concept and get the ick much quicker that when that shift happens. And I'm talking about the shift of like not just blowing up, because there are people like that's natural evolution for people who post consistently and are relatable, but like the people who end up like getting these brand deals and they just feel so disingenuous to who they are. Why do you think what do you think in this world, like in terms of like successful influencers and branding, like what are some like key takeaways that you have, because this is also your profession, like so what are your key takeaways for people who are in leaning into more entrepreneurship or trying to follow their instincts but also like dream of like the big life, right? Like what are your thoughts?
My thought is that the number one most important thing for anybody looking to create, anybody looking to start something, whether that's a social media account, they want to be an influencer, they want to make it big, they want to start a podcast, whatever you want to do, the number one secret ingredient for yourself is going to be authenticity. So any of these TikTok stars that you were mentioning that you had in mind, people love them because they are wholly themselves. They are wholly authentic, right? They're bringing their own personality and their own brand to the masses. And the thing is everybody, we as people, we don't want to be sheep, right? The reason why we have such a bad taste in our mouth with influencers, like nobody wants to feel duped. Nobody wants to feel like they are being pitched to, they are being sold to by like $1 billion brand. Nobody wants to feel that way, because then you feel duped. You want to feel like you're connecting with an authentic, organic person. And so those are the people that are doing it so well, who are being authentically themselves and putting out authentic content, who are not following a recipe, who are not looking at another big influencer and saying, what can I do that they did? Like they made it so big. How can I copy paste, right? And get just as big as them. Once you start doing that, your authenticity drops, right? And so I think that's that number one differentiator, is that authenticity is key to anyone's success, right? It's authenticity, and it's about maintaining an always on presence on whatever platform it is, you choose to pursue.
So I think about people who are starting out and not knowing the direction of like who they like, not knowing their direction, right? And it feels a little lost. And I don't think that's uncommon. I think a lot of people look at people who have made it or their version of made it, who they aspire to, and I think pick and choose and try to experiment with what that looks like, which is okay. What advice would you give in terms of people who are in that stage of being lost and like trying to understand what makes them authentic? Because I think a lot of people tend to not know that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I would first start off by saying that pivoting is natural, right? Especially if you're going after something with the number one goal of making money, right? If you're going after something through a business lens, of course, there are some practical things, there are some practical boxes that you have to tick to make sure or to kind of help you be successful, right? But again, that authenticity piece, because not any one of us are bringing any new concept to the table, right? You're either an influencer in the lifestyle space, or you know, are starting an XYZ business. You are likely not the first ever person to do that, right? So that really means that that's where what you bring to the table uniquely becomes very, very, very important. And I do believe that whether you are seeking to make money or you're just seeking to kind of, you know, experiment with your creative pursuits, that number one focus before anything else has to be your authentic angle and whatever lights you up, right? Because your audience is going to see right through everything. And if you are not authentic to them, they're going to hit pause and they're going to follow someone else, or they're going to look into somebody else, right? If you lead with your authenticity, which is the only thing separating you from the bajillions of other people doing what you do, if you lead with authenticity, understanding that at any point you're entitled, you're allowed to pivot, if you lead with your authenticity and what lights you up, your audience will gravitate towards that.
And just to add to that, if you don't know what lights you up, which is normal for people, you do know what you don't like. And I can tell you that that's enough information where you can even lead with that, right? You can talk about the things that you don't like. You can talk about the things that make you uncomfortable. You can talk about the shitty, icky stuff, right? Like that's authentic.
100%, 100%. But everybody's goal is to wholly be themselves. Whatever you pour yourself into, you bring your whole self to the table. Good, bad, ugly, funny. You know, you lead with that, because that's truly your unique differentiator from everybody else, is yourself.
How do you deal with the people who don't get your vibe?
Listen, I'm human and I can't say it doesn't bother me. That would be fucking crazy. But at the end of the day too, it's noise, right? And you can't be everything to everybody, and you're not going to be, nobody should be somebody that everybody likes, right? It's not realistic. So it's really just about trying to hone everything that you believe in and everything that you love and everything that you think, and realize that there are so many people that are receptive to what you're putting out there. And that number of people that are receptive to what you're doing outweighs the people that are not, or that don't get it, or that don't care, right? You have to focus your energy on what lights you up and what you're providing to the community of people who are receptive to you.
Mm-hmm. If people are starting building brands or trying to do that and want your ear, where could they find you?
They can find me on my website. So I offer a lot of these services. I'm happy to, you know, go back and forth on business ideas and strategy, whether that's social or from a marketing or a branding perspective. But my website, you could start there, which is juliewolvac.com. It's my name.com.
It's my name. Don't wear it up.
It's my name.com.
And so thank you for sharing. And where else can people find you?
I would say that's a really great place to start. I'm also on Instagram at blonde bloopers. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm hopeful that people are going to take away a lot from this. And one of the biggest messages that I heard is like, the like knowing yourself and feeling grounded in that mission. And it doesn't matter what the end result that you're envisioning looks like, because that could change tomorrow, but trusting that and leaning into it, because not leaning into it leads to a life of what if. And we want to live life to the fullest. So I think that that's a really beautiful message, and you have been able to give us the gift of a beautiful chapter in your life in which you really did lean into it. So thank you so much for taking the time to do it.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun and such a great conversation. This conversation lit me up. So I'm so happy that we did it.
Yay!